Good morning and a very happy Holi. So today's topic is meninges. You see, as such, when we say meninges, right? So meninges, they are like covering, and we say dura mater, arachnoid matter, and the pia mater. But what we'll try to do is not only that we'll be learning about this cranial and spinal meninges, we'll also be learning about all those potential spaces, what can go wrong, and at the same time, at the end, we'll be watching that how to diagnose between various types of hematomas. So you'll be watching some of the real cases, right? So the diagnosis not only becomes easy, but it becomes very logical. The moment you see it and you can stamp it. So that is what is called as the spot diagnosis. You just watch it and you'll be able to figure it out that it is, say, subdural hematoma or it is epidural hematoma beyond doubt, right? So let's start. Okay. So when we say meninges, as we just talked about, that we'll divide it into two parts. One is something which is called as cranial meninges, and second is the spinal meninges. Cranial meninges, they'll be covering the brain, and spinal meninges, they'll be covering the, as very rightly guessed, spinal cord, right? Now basically, they both are continuous with each other, right? They are continuous with each other. Yeah, good morning. So they are continuous with each other. So what are meninges? They are simply like cover. They are like cover. They cover the brain. Right? Three layers. Say dura mater, arachnoid mater, and the pia mater. Right? Dura, arachnoid, and pia. These two meninges, right? This is outermost, right? So this is outermost. Name itself is dura. Dura means it is durable, right? Think it like it is durable. It is tough, right? And these two inner, they are also called as leptomeninges, right? Leptomeninges. So there has to be a meaning of lepto. Yeah, lepto stands for something which is thin, something which is delicate. And we'll watch that these meningeal layers, they are actually pretty delicate. Let's change the color. In between, there are few spaces, right? The most important space where the CSF would be present, that is just underneath the arachnoid. Anything which is underneath, so we'll call it sub. Sub means under. So under the arachnoid, so that means this space will be called as the subarachnoid space. Right? This is just a basic thing, right? We'll be elaborating on every part in detail. This space, which is between the dura and the arachnoid, but basically it is under the dura, so we'll call it subdural space. Good one. And then this dura is covering the crane, so it's covering the outermost part of the brain. So between the brain and then there is cranium, right? The bone. In between there is one layer. In between there is one space, right? So this is the bone. This is the dura mater. In between there is space which is outside the dura, so we'll call it epidural space. Very important space. Very important, right? Clinically. Say epidural space, mostly it will be covering, consisting of all those epidural vessels, fat, right? And because this will be continuing all the way to the spinal cord, so there will be spinal nerves also over here. We'll see the spinal nerves, right? So these are the three layers. In simple words, the function. One, obviously, it would be protection, right? Because they are tough. The outermost is tough. So it would be like a mechanical protection, right? So simply with the help of its toughness, it is giving protection. They carry blood vessels, Now this is one interesting point where we say that if they carry blood vessels, in case if these blood vessels rupture, so there'll be collection of blood, hemorrhage, right? And that's what we'll see, that what really happens to that blood when the hemorrhage occurs and how it really looks like onto the CT scan. So we'll be watching several images of the various patients. In some of the cases, what I've tried is I've kept one patient only and various sections of it, so that you actually understand that when there is hemorrhage, so how that blood expands, right? How that hemorrhage expands, that it goes into various spaces which are available, right? And third, obviously, the subarachnoid space, that is what will be giving a cavity, right? It will be giving a cavity formation, ventricles, right? And then there is what is called as the CSF, central, this is cerebrospinal fluid. So that is what we will see. Okay, so let's start with the dura, and we'll study it like this. First, say these meninges in cranial. So I'll give the heading cranial, and then we'll talk about dural vena, dura, arachnoid, and pia, right? We'll be talking about these in detail. Once we have understood it, we'll go to spinal meninges. Is there any difference? Yes, there are some subtle differences, very important differences. But once we have known these things in detail, we need to know only the differences, that what are the difference in these layers when they come across the spinal cord, right? So here is our journey for cranial meninges. Cranial meninges, and we start with our first one, and that is the I'm good. The dura, right? Dura matter. Now you have to keep on visualizing that where exactly are we, right? Now see, we are in dura, right? So this is cranial. Cranial means this is our skull, right? And this is now the dura matter which we are talking about immediately. But now we are dividing this into two parts. Superficial and deep. The entire purpose of taking this topic in this way is so that clinically you understand it very clearly when you look at the patient, and the patient gives the history that, okay, he was playing football and the football hit over here and immediately he became unconscious, right? And then the paramedics came, but before they they can do anything, he regained his consciousness. Well, he finished the match also, right? And then everything was fine. He won the match, and then he went back to his home. He was feeling bit uneasiness. There was some sleepiness. He was feeling dizzy, and he went to sleep, and he never woke up. This is the case which is given in detail in surgery, Love Bailey, right? That's what is called as the lucid interval. So how to identify even from the history that where things can go wrong. So that's what we'll see along with the CT, right? Along with the CT. So the way we were telling about that, you should be able to diagnose the coronary angiography. You should be able to identify that whether which circumflex is involved, or right or left, right? Same way over here, right? Some of the very fine differences. So here it is, the dura, superficial and deep. Superficial, obviously it will be near the bone, so very rightly we can call it periosteal, right? Periosteal. And this deep, that would be near rest of the meninges, so we'll be calling it meningeal, right? We'll be calling it meningeal. So 3 layers, and first layer, it's 2-part. Now both these layers, they are very tightly connected, right? Firmly attached. They both are very firmly attached. So then why are we making so much of fuss creating 2 spaces? Because there is only one thing, except, and that is the most mesmerizing topic, and that is, except They are open at certain places, and these places they are called as the all-time superb topic, dural venous sinuses. Dural venous sinuses. You will be so happy once you learn this thing. It is such a beautiful topic. So we are very clear on this, that this meningeal layer with respect to arachnoid, so this is superficial to arachnoid, correct? It is superficial to arachnoid. And what we are talking about is this. So this is the periosteal layer, right? And this is the meningeal layer. They both are dural layers, but it would be O like this. Here they are firmly attached, but they will be opening up at certain places. They'll be separating from each other, and these are called as the dural venous sinus. Good. And yes, we have already said about the dura. Dura means it is durable, it is tough, right? It is tough connective tissue. It is tough connective tissue, and because it is tough, so obviously its function is for protection, right? Okay. We need to add one, or let's write it over here. Duplicate. Let's write it over here. Then we'll come back to this image, right? Because this is a very good image. Why do we need these sinuses? First thing. Now let's dive slightly into deep about the blood supply. Next time we'll be taking the blood supply in complete depth. Every part of the brain and along with every artery will be watching it, right? Entire circle of Willis. But in nutshell, blood supply always tells like this, that there are arteries, there are veins. Normally in upper limb or in lower limb, right, when we say that, okay, this is a femoral artery, so then there would be a femoral vein. Veins will be corresponding to arteries, right? So almost the supply, the way arteries they go, veins they return, and things continue. That's not the case in brain. Brain has got a very different mechanism. How is it? In case of arteries, there are two major systems. One, what is called as the internal carotid artery, right and left. So right and left internal carotid arteries. Right now we are not going into the detail which branch, this, that, etc. Right, that is what entire circle of Willis we'll see next time. But basically arteries, internal carotid artery, and then the vertebral arteries, they go back, they've combined to form a basilar artery, and then that basilar artery divides. So we'll call that thing collectively as vertebro-basilar system, right? So we have got two systems, vertebro-basilar system, and then they take care of the entire brain, right? So what will they be doing? They'll be giving oxygen, they'll be giving nutrients, everything, glucose and oxygen, carbon dioxide transfer, and then the return journey starts. This return journey is for the veins, right? Return journey is for veins. But these veins, all these veins, they will be draining into dural venous sinuses. How wonderful. Dural venous sinuses. Because there is only one major exit, right? Entry was internal carotid artery in the vertebro-basilar system. So large amount of blood is coming under pressure, right? After this entire process of this nutrient and oxygen transfer, carbon dioxide transfer, etc., veins, there'll be major veins, and then they'll keep on draining into the dural venous sinuses. And then from dural venous sinus, finally everyone will be going into the internal jugular vein, right? So that's the thing. That's how the whole circulation goes. So immediately now we understand that this is super important structure, dural venous sinus, right? Very important structure. When we say that this is important, it is still more important. It is divided into two types, right? there are few structures. There are so many dural venous sinuses, because see, now you are clear that that's the entire dura, and in between there is opening of those spaces, right? And that is where all those channels, right, they are going on, and they are for the venous blood. That's why DVS or dural venous sinuses. So we'll divide them, that few of them, they are unpaired. Unpaired. Unpaired means there is only one such sinus. So this is, obviously they should be central, right? They should be central, because if anything is going in center, so like nose is in center, so we have got one nose, right? Eyes are not both the sides, so that's why it is paired. Ears are paired. So exactly the same way, dural venous sinus, right, will put it like unpaired and paired, right? So they are on both the sides, both the sides. Should we really know this? Yes, we should know this, right? All the sinuses. But it becomes extremely boring, because if we just keep on elaborating that, okay, this is sagittal, infrasagittal, etc., and we never remember it. Why not to draw it? Once you draw, it will become very, very easy. Right? All we need to remember is just 2 points. One, the posterior part, which is called as confluence. Confluence means various sinuses, they will come and they will make a meeting, right? The superior sagittal will come, transverse sinus will come, occipital will come, straight sinus will come, and then they will be making the point, what is called as the confluence, right? Confluence. I'll show you a method also about how to remember it. But first, let's have a look at that, how these sinuses, they really look like. And for that, this is the image. Sorry. This one. This is a sinus, right? But sinuses, they are like spaces, correct? Sinuses, they are like spaces. So this space is created by the dura. So this is where the dura is like fully covered, but in between it creates this wedge. This is what is called as the falx cerebri. Falx cerebri, right? This is like a crescent. This is crescent. This shape is called as crescent, or the half moon shaped, right? Crescent. So how do you think about it? Think about it that on both the sides, on one side there is right cerebral hemisphere, and left side there is left cerebral hemisphere. So this is the cerebral hemispheres, and this falx cerebri is like going in as a wedge, right? So it is dividing it into two cerebral hemisphere, right? So it is in between two cerebral hemispheres. We are talking about what? We are talking about not dural venous sinus, we are talking about the dura, right? This dura, it is like this. But over here in the roof, we have got superior sagittal sinus, this one, right? In the roof, say this is falx cerebri, right? This blue one, which is above, it is called as the superior sagittal sinus. And a small one, which you are watching it over here, this small one over here. So that is very right. That would be the inferior sagittal sinus. Should change the color. Yeah. This would be inferior sagittal sinus. So now from this point onwards, inferior sagittal sinus will call as ISS, and superior sagittal will call it as SSS. So things become easier, right? When we'll draw, it becomes easier. There are few bony marks over here, right? If you remember, it is fine. Right now, if you don't remember, nothing to worry. But this part, it is this part, this one. It is called as the crista. because it is like a crest elevation, right? There is a bone, ethmoid bone, right? So this is called as the crista galli of ethmoid. Not to worry if you forget it. You will automatically be learning it so easily when you'll be learning head and neck. But yes, worth knowing it, right? That it is crista galli of ethmoid bone. And on the posterior part, now see this, you know, that is what is called as the occipital bone, right? Back is the occipital bone. And here is, so this is occipital bone. There is prominence over here. You just put your hand on the back side and you'll be able to feel. Yeah, there is prominence. So this is what is called as the external occipital protuberance. Protuberance. That means this is an elevation. Sorry, I wrote it into 3-4 parts, but it is external occipital protuberance. External. Now we cannot feel that internal occipital protuberance because then we have to go inside the skull. So just to explain it, here it is. The inside of the skull also, it has got one prominence. So right, when you cut the skull, when we'll be watching, this is the point. This is the point. This one, right? This one. That is where we'll be watching and we'll correctly name it as internal, right? Because it is inside occipital protuberance. So a prominence which is inside the occipital bone, inside of the skull. So this falx cerebris ranges from crista galli to internal occipital protuberance, right? Fine, very clear. Achha. No, olfactory will not be coming into picture at this point, because unnecessary will be going into that detail. Crista galli is that spot, because then there would be all those olfactory fine sheath and ethmoid bones, right? We'll be going into, we'll keep on sidetracking ourselves. So right now I'm not talking about olfactory or anything. No, nothing. Simply, right, let's make it as simple as possible. Why to complicate it? A point which is over there, right, center, crista galli, because it is like a very prominent bone, right? When you touch, it is like a very sharp thing, right? Rest of the form, what you are talking about is what is called as the cribriform plate, but don't confuse it right now, right? Don't confuse it. So this is crista galli to internal occipital protuberance. Simple. Next, so we have learnt two things. One, the superior sagittal sinus, and one, inferior sagittal sinus. Superior sagittal sinus and inferior sagittal sinus. Simple as that, right? Now this is a meeting place. This is a meeting place. That is the place where four sinuses will meet, and this is where they will do the toss. Okay, chalo. Right? Yeah, actually, the toss. Right? T-O-S-S. So that is one we can figure out. Superior sagittal sinus. Done. The second one, this one. This is very simple, very straight, because its name itself is straight sinus. Straight sinus. What is straight sinus? We know now this inferior sagittal sinus. Where was inferior sagittal sinus? That falx cerebri, which was from crista galli to internal occipital protuberance into the base, right? This one, this, it reaches to this point, right? So that is inferior sagittal sinus. It is into sagittal plane, right? It is into the center. So that's why both these structures, they are unpaired, right? Both these structures, they are unpaired. So they are central. So we have got superior sagittal sinus, we have got inferior sagittal sinus, because both of them, they were into the center. Fine. Now superior sagittal sinus, that will go straight away to this point, that is where the meeting point. Inferior sagittal sinus, then it will send one sinus like this, straight to this meeting point, right? This is the meeting point. And this is called as the straight sinus. So it is called as straight sinus. So we have learnt superior sagittal, inferior sagittal, straight sinus, and till this point, all these sinuses, they are centrally located, right? We are just picking up like that, and then we'll expand, and then we'll go towards cavernous sinus, right, which is into the center, and then from the both the sides, and from there, everything will combine basilar venous plexus, that is the venous plexus which is at the base, and then everything will be going into the internal jugular vein, right? So here it is supersagittal, infrasagittal, and this. So this straight. So we have settled this. We have settled this. Okay. The next one. The bone was what? The bone was occipital bone, right? Because this is internal occipital protuberance. So there is one sinus which is going like this, right? Which is going like this, and it is going below. And which bone would it be? Obviously occipital bone, right? Because that's the only bone which is present. So we'll name this as occipital. Occipital. So this is called as the occipital sinus. So done. Our third O has been taken care of. So this is the occipital sinus. Just to know that this occipital sinus is the smallest sinus. It is the smallest sinus of all. And then comes from both the sides. From both the sides. So I'm changing this color. From both the sides, these sinuses come. Now, this is called as the transverse sinus. Name itself is telling that it is transverse, right? It is transverse. So, transverse, right? So, it has to come from both the sides, right and left. So, going back to our, right, this is where it is. Yeah, unpaired, we have got superior sagittal, inferior sagittal, straight sinus, right, and the occipital sinus. Occipital. You have almost completed these unpaired one, right? There are just two, but they are very small. So don't worry. These are main unpaired. Superior sagittal, inferior sagittal, straight, that is inferior sagittal to that junction point, and the occipital which was going below. Right? Now, to properly understand, I have to explain you where is this transverse sinus, because this completes our, that confluence. This is called as the confluence, this meeting point, right? I'm putting star over here, It is called as confluence. It is called as confluence of dural venous sinuses. Confluence means meeting place, and that is remembered by TOS. So T stands for transverse venous sinus, O is occipital, first S is superior sagittal, and the second one is the straight sinus. Out of this, transverse is right and left. So it is paired. The rest are unpaired. Unpaired means they are into center. So we need to just see where is transverse sinus. Here is the transverse sinus. See, that's transverse sinus. Transverse sinus. Good one. So we have transverse sinus, and then rest of the assembly will be above. Right? Because it would be, this is like a base of skull. This is base of skull. Right? This is anterior cranial fossa, right? This is anterior cranial fossa. This is middle cranial fossa, and this is the posterior cranial fossa. Right? That's how they are divided. This is, right. See, this is crista galli. This one. See, so sharp. This one. Right? So like a dagger. Right? That's crista galli. So very sharp border, and from that sharp border it straight away comes out. So this is how we see that transverse sinus done. Our next purpose is to see rest of the structure, that how exactly are they formed. For that, okay, let's do it this way. We talked about, say, falx cerebri, right? Now the next layer which we need to know, it is what is called as the tentorium cerebelli. So dura mater, our main topic is dura mater. In dura mater, this dural venous sinuses are coming up, and we talked about first, that is the falx cerebri, right, which is central one. Our second one, which is like a tent-like structure, so that's why it is called as the tentorium. Tentorium. Now it will be involved with what? It will be involved with cerebelli, right? Cerebelli. So cerebelli means what? Cerebrum. Cerebellum. Cerebellum, right? This is cerebrum, our big brain, and this one is cerebellum. So there is tentorium cerebelli, so which will be forming like a roof, right? It will be forming like a tent. So it is like this tent, and then there would be, say, cerebellum into it. Now there would be even one partition in between. So there was a partition when between the cerebrum, so we say it's falx cerebri. So over here, this is a partition which is between cerebellum, so we'll call it falx cerebelli. Cerebelli, right? Falx cerebelli. So this is what? This is in between cerebellar hemisphere, right? Cerebellar hemisphere. And the fourth which we need to know, that when there is pituitary, right? This is like sella turcica, all those bone names will come, but then there is, this is also called as pituitary fossa, so obviously the pituitary gland will be there. This is, when it is covered, it is called as the diaphragma. Diaphragma sella. So this is the pituitary, and here it is, it's covering, right? We'll just see that. But what it is doing, it is, this is pituitary fossa, right? It is pituitary fossa, and this is forming roof of it, roof. So it is forming the roof of pituitary fossa, right? And we just said about the falx cerebelli. So this falx cerebelli will be housing what? It will be housing occipital sinus. Now see, it becomes so easy, right? So it is the house of occipital sinus. How nice? Because occipital sinus, it means this is just behind, right behind. This is the occipital bone, and just at the base over there lies the cerebellum. Cerebellum has got two hemispheres, right and left, and in between that is the occipital sinus. So occipital sinus is, that's why unpaired, it is only one, right? So these are the various folds. These are the various folds of say dura, right? Now to make it better, let's draw it, right? So this is, all these are sinuses, right? See nicely. And yes, we'll identify even other sinuses, because so many sinuses they are seen over here, right? Like say this is cavernous sinus, then superior petrosal, inferior petrosal, right? Basal, this basal venous plexus. But let's wait, let it come. right? So we can always come back to this picture. First, let's have a clear idea and we draw it. You can also draw this thing along with me, so it will be very clear. Very simple diagram. We should be scientifically correct, not artistically. Right? If you are artistically correct, well and good, but not to worry much. This first thing what we draw is a superior sagittal sinus. We give it number 1. Right? I always write this number so that you also draw in that order. Then superior sagittal sinus, inferior sagittal sinus is smaller, so we just draw this thing. Inferior sagittal sinus, so this is 2. Inferior sagittal sinus and superior sagittal sinus, they will meet by one sinus, and that sinus is absolutely straight, so this one would be 3, and that is a straight sinus. Straight sinus. This is what this is called as the confluence. That's the point where all the sinuses will be meeting, right? Let's make one more sinus which is going at absolutely the base, absolutely at the base, because this is the sinus which is dividing, which is into falx cerebelli, right? Dividing the cerebellar part into 2. So this is below, right? So this is what occipital sinus, very right? Occipital sinus. So if we write it over here, TOSS, or let's write it in this color, TOSS. Superior sagittal sinus, straight sinus, occipital sinus, done. Now transverse sinus. Transverse sinus will be on both the sides, right? Because we saw that it is going like this, right? Going like this. This is the transverse sinus. That's the transverse sinus, right? And this portion, this one, right, that is tentorium cerebelli. Tentorium, tent-like, right? Cerebelli, which is covering the cerebellum. Just if we remove this, we'll get the cerebellum. So here it is. This is the straight sinus, right? Here is the straight sinus. See this one. This one is a straight sinus. Straight sinus. Where is the occipital? Occipital will be going underneath it. It is at the base, right? So occipital is still underneath. So occipital at base of tentorium cerebelli. So that's why here it is straight, right? And this is the place where everyone would be meeting, right? This is the place. And where is it? This one is superior sagittal sinus. So it will be going all the way up, right? That's how. So falx cerebri, is it between superior and inferior? No. Falx cerebri is not between superior and inferior sagittal sinus. Conceptually, this is wrong. Falx cerebri is something which is holding superior and inferior sagittal sinus, right? Falx cerebri is what? It is dura. Dura can never be, dura can never be between sinuses, because dura is enveloping the sinus, right? Right from the beginning, when I said that this is the periosteal layer and then there is a meningeal layer, your sinuses, they are over here, right? So it cannot be. Sinuses, they are always covered. They are always covered there because they are very delicate. There are no walls, nothing. These are just the channels, right? Because dura itself is so thick, so stiff, so powerful, so it is creating these channels, right? So that is the periosteal layer, this is the meningeal layer, and in between spaces where they both are separated, that's where the blood is running, right? Venous blood is running. So the correct sentence should be the superior sagittal sinus is into the roof of falx cerebri and inferior sagittal sinus is into the base of falx cerebri. That's the falx cerebri. Superior sagittal would be over here, inferior sagittal would be over here, right? So the sentence would be other way around, right? Falx cerebri is not in between both of them. It is superior sagittal and inferior sagittal, they are into the falx cerebri, right? Okay. So occipital at base of the tentorium cerebelli. So let's draw it. So now when we look from the side, this is very clear that occipital. And then think it like transverse is going like this. So transverse I'm drawing with other color, right? But just I'm drawing it like this, that doesn't mean it is single, because it will be going towards the other side also. Are you getting it? Right? So if I just draw other side in the form of dotted, right? But don't want to spoil the picture, because otherwise वो दिमाग में there confusion creates कि अरे ये कहाँ से आ गया. So I'm just drawing and then I'll remove it. Right? It would be like this. Right? It will be like this. So this is like left, left, and this is like right transverse sinus. Right? But we are removing this part. Right? So just for our understanding, so that we don't spoil the picture. So this is number 5, and this is the transverse sinus. Okay? Transverse sinus. So transverse is also done. So that's the place where all these sinuses they meet. Importance tremendous. We'll come to that. But sorry. Superior inferior sagittal, straight, occipital, transverse. Now what? This transverse sinus will go in S-shaped. It will go like this. Right? It will go like this. This transverse sinus. Right? We'll watch also. So, but because of its this typical shape, now we call this thing, sixth one, sigmoid sinus. Sigmoid sinus. Right? And this sigmoid sinus will straight away open into, yes, IJV, internal jugular vein. Right? That's the internal jugular vein, a very powerful vein, right? Internal jugular vein. And then that's the reason that it has got so much of clinical importance. Jugular venous pressure, JVP, what we say, right? So when it will come to clinics, we'll be talking about JVP in more detail. But that's the reason it is so important. Direct communication with the brain. Now, taking it further, right? We are talking about the posterior portion. The anterior portion, there is the anterior portion, there is one sinus, what is called as the cavernous sinus. So this is 6, that's the 7th, cavernous sinus. Now see, all these sinuses, they are between, every sinus is between that opening of this periosteal membrane and the meningeal membrane, right? So it means every sinus is well packed, right? Well packed. And then finally they are opening and blood is running between them, right? So this is the cavernous sinus. Cavernous sinus is on both the sides, right? Is on both the sides. So right and left. So let's write it like left cavernous sinus. Here also left transverse sinus. So there is no confusion. Similarly, left sigmoid sinus, left internal jugular vein. So that's the cavernous sinus. To this cavernous sinus, there will be two other sinuses which will be running. One from here, second from the sigmoid sinus here, right? Are you getting it? I'll give the name and then I'll show you. In 1 second, picture would be crystal clear. Just give the name 8 and 9. There is one very important bone, it is called as the petrosal bone. Petrous part, petrosal. It is quite rough. So if I say they both are petrosal sinus, so one is above, one is below, you know how to name them. Superior petrosal and inferior petrosal. Let's see them. This figure, it is very nicely seen. I'm zooming it. See? Ha. We said that from the transverse sinus, this one is our transverse sinus. From transverse sinus, it goes, and that's what is called as the superior petrosal sinus. And then another one is the inferior petrosal sinus, right? Superior petrosal sinus and the inferior petrosal sinus. Can be seen? Can you see it? Can you figure out from this image? Right? Very nicely, we have got this one sinus. Right? This is underneath it. So these are the petrosal sinuses. And on this side, on right hand side, it is removed, but here it is, this one. That is cavernous sinus. Cavernous sinus. So now see how effectively we can see that this is the transverse sinus, and it goes that superior petrosal sinus, and it goes into the cavernous sinus. Then this superior petrosal, right? I'm just for the reference taking the image back over here. Yeah, right. So this transverse sinus, as it proceeds, it becomes sigmoid sinus. So it will be going down, right? So over here, that sigmoid sinus, when it will go down, and it will give one more sinus, right, which will be underneath. So that one would be the inferior petrosal sinus. The superior petrosal sinus and the inferior petrosal sinus, and all of them, they are going into this cavernous sinus. Here the cavernous sinus has been removed, right? Otherwise it would have been like this. So it has been removed to show some of the important structures. By the way, this is very important structure, and that one is our carotid artery, internal carotid artery, right? And the optic chiasma and all the function features. This one is the basal venous plexus, is at the base, this one, right? I'm just putting star and I'm writing it over here. Basal venous plexus, which are at the base, basal venous plexus, right? This is a star. Okay. Fit to width. Yeah. So next we need right, this. Most of the sinuses you have learnt. Most of the sinuses, right? Except just for the reference that where exactly will be this superior petrosal sinus. Well, superior petrosal sinus, all you need to remember is we have got the tentorium cerebelli, right? Tentorium cerebelli was what? Tentorium cerebelli was that this is the falx cerebri, right? And then this is tentorium cerebelli, which is covering the cerebellum, right? So here this superior petrosal sinus, that is all the way from cavernous to transverse. So we saw that, right? From the cavernous to the transverse sinus, right? There was the transverse sinus, and that's where it was getting connected. So it is into the lateral margin of tentorial cerebelli, right? Tentorium cerebelli, lateral margins. So this is, right, superior petrosal sinus, and will one word into the anterior enterolateral margin of tentorium cerebelli, right? That's what we saw. Here it is. This one is right into the lateral margin. Here the things have been dissected. Here it is seen clearly, right? So that's how it goes. Okay. So most of them, they are done except two small structures, just two. Now, we said that cavernous is a paired one, right? This is very good. Let's add one more page. Duplicate page. So let's watch from the top. Let's watch from the top. This is one cavernous sinus. This is another cavernous sinus. Both of them, they are connected. Both of them, they are connected. So this is cavernous. This is cavernous. So this one, which is in between two cavernous, so we'll call it intercavernous sinus, right? No big rocket science in this. This is also intercavernous sinus, but one it's anterior, one is posterior. So this one is anterior cavernous sinus and this one is posterior cavernous sinus. Again, they are one only because centrally located. So done. Our list of paired venous sinuses, right? One, superior sagittal sinus, top. Second, inferior sagittal sinus, chota bhai of superior sagittal sinus, right? He goes with that straight sinus, right? And straight away he meets over there. Then underneath, on the inner surface of the occipital bone, there was occipital sinus, correct? Right? These were all big boss, right? And this number 5, anterior intercavernous sinus, and this one is the posterior intercavernous sinus. And all of them, right, at the base, there is basilar venous plexus, right? Because it is plexus means it is group, and that is one group only at the base. So it is central. So these are done. These are all paired sinuses, right? All paired sinuses. Unpaired, not paired, unpaired, right? Unpaired. Now it is okay. So these are all unpaired venous sinuses, single one. And page. And in case if it is asked that which one would be paired ones, right? Paired both the sides. So one which was going like this, right? Transverse. Transverse is important from the perspective of toss. That is for that confluence, that meeting point. Transverse sinus, occipital, supraSagittal and straight, they are all single, and this one is double, right? Both the sides. Then this transverse sinus was taking turn and it was sigmoid sinus, right? Or try to remember in this order only, so it becomes very easy. So it becomes sigmoid sinus. So sigmoid sinus and transverse sinus are on the back side. And there is cavernous sinus, right? A big one, a cavernous sinus. And then transverse talks with cavernous, right? Now transverse is above, so there would be superior petrosal sinus because it was on the petrous bone, superior petrosal. And similarly, that sigmoid, which is going all the way just for that internal jugular vein. So this would be the inferior petrosal, right? Almost all the sinuses are completed. Just too small, you have to look for it. 6 and 7. Now these are, there is a sphenoid bone, right? Which is like a winged bone. So think it like that this is sphenoparietal and the petrosal bone and the squamous part, the squamous, petrosquamous. At this point, keep them in mind, but major sinuses we have talked about, right? This is just to complete the list. Just to complete the list, right? Sorry. Achha. Now let me show you. Sorry. Let me show you how they appear on radiological imaging. Only it's not so that we'll be able to watch all the sinuses together at one point, but major sinuses, see this, how they really look like. This one, that's superior sagittal sinus, right? Some of the sinuses, so they look so awesome, right? This one, this is inferior sagittal sinus. And inferior sagittal sinus, it meets, this is the confluence, correct? This is the confluence. That's where they are meeting, confluence, or the meeting point. See, that's the straight sinus. Because inferior sagittal sinus is giving the hint that where should it really land. Now, if we go into more detail, right, this is like one very important vein, right? But that will go when we'll be studying the blood supply, right? Otherwise, we'll end up in this only. And still there is so much to learn. Right? This, just one name I'll say, this is called as vein of Galen, right? Very important vein, but we'll cover that thing when we'll be talking about the blood supply, right? Actual blood supply. Our current focus is on the sinuses. So here it is in this superior sagittal, inferior sagittal, straight sinuses, and the confluence. That's what we really see. Yet even other sinuses are also seen. Okay, moving on to the next, our next layer. So that was the dural layer. Now we are talking about the cranial layers, and in cranial layer, our next layer which is coming up is arachnoid, right? Arachnoid. Arachnoid means what? This is a very delicate layer, right? But it is avascular, right? Some characteristics, avascular, and this is impermeable. Impermeable. So here, that's the dural layer. In dural layer, there would be, say, this is like dural venous sinus. This one would be the arachnoid layer. This one would be the pia, right? So dura, arachnoid, pia, and then there are few specific structures. The structures which will be emerging from arachnoid, right? Remember, structures which will be emerging from arachnoid, and then they will be going all the way into the dural venous sinuses. They are called as the arachnoid granulations, right? They are called as the arachnoid granulation. We'll talk more about it, but just for the clarity, they are called as arachnoid granulations. And then there would be few structures which will be going underneath. We are changing the color, and they will be going onto the pia mater, right? They'll be going into the pia mater. They are called as the arachnoid trabeculations. Arachnoid trabeculations. What are they? What do they do? Yes, we talk about it. But this is the difference. Arachnoid granulations, arachnoid trabeculations. So these arachnoid trabeculations, right? They are where? They are into subarachnoid space. So this is a space, because brain is here, right? Underneath the pia. So this is subarachnoid space. That means this is the space where there would be CSF, cerebrospinal fluid. There would be blood vessels, right? There would be blood vessels into this. Both these layers, they are collectively called as the leptomeninges, thin, delicate leptomeninges, thin, delicate layers, right? Then this space is what? This space, this is a subdural space, right? It is subdural, underneath the dura. Is this space filled with something? Yes, very small amount of, right? Very thin layer of fluid, thin fluid, but very less. So that's how it is. Now let's talk about arachnoid granulations, right? That what exactly are they? Let's take a new page. So arachnoid granulations. They are also called as the Pacchionian bodies, right? Pacchi, Pacchionian bodies. We saw it that they reach dural plexus, right? So they actually pierce the meningeal dura, right? Because this was the periostal dura, this one is meningeal dura, dural venous plexuses are over here, right? So they go all the way, and this is our arachnoid. From here the granulations, they were going like this, so they pierce this meningeal layer, right? This is the meningeal layer. They pierce and they enter into the dural venous sinus, right? Because immediately after that, once they pierce this meningeal layer, they are into sinuses. So that's the dural venous sinus. So pierce meningeal layer. And if the meningeal layer, that is the layer which is forming the wall of these sinuses. So meningeal layer is pierced, meningeal layer, and they enter into dural venous sinus. Dural venous sinus. Okay, that's the arachnoid, right? But this arachnoid, so that is in continuation with CSF, right? Over here, so it is CSF, because this is arachnoid, this is subarachnoid space, and subarachnoid space is filled with CSF, right? So that's the reason this is continuous. This is continuous with these subarachnoid, these arachnoid granulations. They are in continuation. They are the link between the dural venous sinuses and the cerebrospinal fluid, right? That's how they drain. So how the things they are occurring, again we are taking a small concept which will be discussed at length when we'll be talking only about the third ventricles, right? Interventricular foramen, cerebellar duct of Sylvius, Megendie and for Lashka, and the fourth ventricle, right? That is CSF. So CSF, right? It is formed by choroid plexus, right? Choroid plexus will make this CSF, cerebrospinal fluid. This CSF, right? It will be into the brain, right? About 150 ml, and then say it is formed and absorbed, right? So if it keeps on forming, so that will lead to raised intracranial tension. So it should get absorbed. This is the system. Once it is prepared, right, via, this is the subarachnoid space, right? This CSF is into subarachnoid space via arachnoid granulations. Arachnoid granulations, it will drain into the venous system, into the vascular system, right? Thus, this balance is created. So either there is increased production, or there is decreased absorption. Any of these things that can lead to raised intracranial tension. Okay, right? Very easy. So this is the importance. This is the point where the CSF is absorbed back into the vascular system. So that's why it carries so much of importance, right? Now, there are few areas, right? There are few areas that is where, say, this is the pia mater, right? And then this is the arachnoid mater. But certain areas of this arachnoid, right, that is where it is going bit far from the pia, and these are called as these areas. The way we were calling when it was coming to dura, we were calling that it is dural venous sinuses, right? But over here, that's the arachnoid, and these spaces, this space, they are all underneath. So we'll call them subarachnoid, right? Subarachnoid. Now subarachnoid space is known for CSF. right? That is known for CSF, but these are some bigger areas. So there is a tunnel, and then there is a water collection, big area, which is, they are called as cisterns. Cisterns, right? They are like a bigger pool, bigger pool. So these are the subarachnoid cisterns. That is the point where the arachnoid is becoming slightly far from pia, and that's where it forms, right? Just to know that there are uh, arachnoid granulation come out from dural venous sinus. Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. In fact, I should say other way around. Say arachnoid granulation, they enter into dural venous sinuses, right? Because see, that's the periosteal layer. This is the meningeal layer. This is the dural venous sinus, right? So those granulations, they pierce this meningeal layer. The moment they pierce, they are into the dural venous sinus. So CSF is going into this direction. So thus dural venous sinus is receiving those granulations, arachnoid granulations, right? That is for the absorption, and that's how they keep the balance. Choroid plexus will keep on creating CSF, and from here it will keep on absorbing. Just what do they carry? CSF, cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebrospinal fluid, right? So that they keep both the things into proper balance. Yeah, it's outlet for CSF. You're right. You're right. It's like an outlet for, I mean, granulations, right? You're talking about arachnoid granulations. They are outlet. They are outlet for CSF, right? And it drains into the dural venous sinus. Okay. Now in subarachnoid systems, when we'll be learning the actual anatomy part, at that point we can elaborate on it. But we can just understand one thing, that these are the areas where there is widening. They are wide, right? So these are the cisterna. One which is very big is cisterna magna, right? This is the largest. So just to know. Then near the pons there is one, so it is called as the pontine cisterna or the pontine magna, right? Then there is chiasmatic cistern, right? These are all some of the bigger ones. Now in spine, at this point we must talk about it. It is called as the lumbar cistern, right? This is the lumbar cistern. Now, how this lumbar cistern is formed? See, that's the spinal cord, right? That's the spinal cord. Huh, huh. That's what I'm about to explain, right? So this is the spinal cord. Okay? The spinal cord in adult, it ends at L1 or L2, right? So if you have to do the lumbar puncture, right? You have to do the lumbar puncture, you will be doing below the L2, right? So how will you do it? See this. This is what? This is dura. Okay? The dura matter. The dura matter. Then there is arachnoid matter, and then there is the pia matter. Pia matter though is in close association with the spinal cord. We are right now talking about the spinal cord. But this arachnoid matter, right? As we said, what that arachnoid matter and the pia matter, the space between both of them is called as the cistern. This is what really happens. This is uh, just a minute. This dura, we draw it with this green, right? Chalo. So that now with yellow, we are drawing this arachnoid. This arachnoid is going like this. So this is the place. This is the place that is suitable for lumbar puncture. Why do we want to do lumbar puncture? Because as we pierce this, we reach to CSF collection. We get the CSF over here. This is what is called as the lumbar cistern. right? Lumbar system. Because spinal cord has ended, so pia mater has ended at that level. Dura, this arachnoid matter, it extends. This is arachnoid. This one is dura, and piato is on the top, right? This one is, this you can say pia. So this is where the lumbar puncture. This is actually how we understand the whole system. Okay. The next one. Now let's take it a bit quickly. Right. This is the pia mater. Again, still we are talking about the cranial pia mater. Cranial pia mater is highly vascular. Right. It is highly vascular. Arachnoid is not. Right. And this follows contours of the brain. Right. Follows contours of brain. So that's why with every fold, it will keep on going it like this. But the way we have got now habit of forming all those spaces, so underneath the pia and the brain starts, right, between. So we'll call this thing as subpial space, subpial space. And this is the space where we see those our astrocytes. That's where the astrocytes will be there, right? So that is also called as the glia terminans, right? Glia limitans, right? This was what was called as the glia limitans. Glia limitans. So superficial blood vessels of brain, they are related over here, right? All those superficial blood. So what would be the function of it? One, there's got some very good functions. First one, the blood vessels, they are over there, blood is there. This one is pia mater, right? And then there is brain. So this is what creates blood-brain barrier. Blood-brain barrier. So this blood-brain barrier, that is where even the astrocytes are sitting. So those astrocytes, they will be involved into fighting with any of the structure which is coming out, right? Infection or this is what provides the resistance, astrocytes. Second, it degrades neurotransmitters. So if it is done, that means unnecessary, it will prevent all those prolonged actions, right? It will prevent prolonged actions. So that's what is the function. Now we talk about the spinal, right? Now we are talking about the spinal part. So there is spinal dura mater. Only one change. Vertebral column has got its own periosteum. So there is no periosteal spinal. So the way we say in dura, there is a periosteal membrane and there is meningeal membrane, right? In spine, there is no periosteal membrane because vertebral column canal has its own periosteum, true periosteum. Right? And this thing will go all the way, this dura will go all the way up to the S2, sacrum 2, right? So this ends at S2. Remember, spinal cord, it ends at L1, L2, right? It ends, spinal cord ends at L1, L2. So thus we have got epidural space, right? Epidural space. And this is where all the, in this epidural space, we'll be having those vertebral venous plexuses, right? Those vertebral venous plexuses will be there. Epidural, right? So it is outside the dura, right? Achha. Then comes the spinal pia mater, right? Spinal pia mater. It is continuous with cranial pia and it is consisting of, because it is vascular, right? So again, like that, like cranial, it is vascular, it is continuous with cranial one, right? Cranial pia, right? Cranial pia, and it comes down. What it will do is that as it goes, right, there is formation of what is called as the conus medullaris, because all the way from the spinal cord it comes down, right? It is coming down, and from the foramen magnum, right? From the foramen magnum, the big one, and it till the thoracic 12. Right? It supports all those spinal nerves, because see over here now there is no brain, right? Those spinal nerves, they are coming out, right? Their spinal nerves are coming out. So this supports these spinal nerves, right? So supports spinal nerves. So these are a sort of the ligamentous projections, right? They are like ligamentous projections, right? Achha. Now we talk about a very typical clinical condition. What I was telling you, that this patient comes, right, with a history that, see, this is the area, that is what is called as the pterion, right? That is called as the pterion. Please cover second and fourth here also. Yeah, sure. Yes, yes. So that is what is called as the pterion. So pterion is the place where those four sutures meet. This is the weakest area, right? These two, right? This is a weak area. So whenever there is a punch or while playing, say suppose football, right? Any of the hard impact, if this gets fractured, what is there is just underneath the skull. Let's say this is the area, this is a thin plate of pterion. Just underneath it, there is middle meningeal artery, the branch of middle meningeal artery. Middle meningeal artery, right? Now this middle meningeal artery, its branch, right, anterior branch. Now because it is underneath it. So what I mean by that is that this is the bone, this is a bone, right? And the artery is like this. It is underneath the bone, right? So when you will dissect, you will be able to see the groove of middle meningeal artery into the bone. So if the bone snaps, bone breaks, so it will break the middle meningeal artery also, right? Because it is in close approximation, so it breaks. This is what leads to epidural hematoma. Epidural hematoma. So epidural hematoma is because of middle meningeal artery rupture. Now as it is in bone, so that's why it won't close. It will keep on bleeding, right? It will keep on bleeding. When it is bleeding, it's not in every case, but in many of the cases, right? Achha. We just add one page. Duplicate. Just a minute. Why it happened? Sometimes this software gets overloaded and it crashes. Now it won't happen. What I'm explaining is it's called as the lucid interval. Lucid interval. The history is that there is injury. Post injury, person became unconscious without any special effort, right? He seemed okay, right? Resumes back to his work. That person feels some dizziness, headache, ignores, goes to sleep, and passes away, right? Never wakes up. This is what is called as the lucid interval. It is not always present, but yes, usually it is present. Right? If you see, you will find the neurological signs also, right? There would be, so if properly examined, right, you will find the classical neurological signs, right? Which are the neurological signs? One, that say the person is unconscious, right? There is headache. Then vision is affected. Vision is blurred, visual disturbance, right? Nausea, right? Vomiting. So if it is happening, be, yes, happy Holi. Thank you. Achha. How will it really look like? This is the classical appearance. This is the classical appearance. That's how this this epidural hematoma would look like. See this. You have to remember it like this, right? See, this is convex and it is biconvex, right? Biconvex and classical appearance, this is what is called as the hyperdense area, right? This is epidural hemorrhage. What's the solution? Burr hole. Burr hole. Burr hole is with a drill, right? It is drilled and a hole is created and it is tapped, right? Treatment has to be surgical. Yeah, that's what I said. Treatment is burr hole. It is called as the burr hole. Literally with a drill, right? It is the burr hole. Dangerous because as it gets collected, it will keep on compressing the brain. See over here, such a massive compression. Now, say at this point of time, because I think I got one more image. So this I have kept it for the purpose of that when the CT is done, what exactly it makes. Say when this is the head, right? This is the head. And when the patient is lying, right? When the patient is lying, this is the patient, right? And when we are taking the slices, right? When the slices, they are like this, right? This is what is called as the axial plane. This is called as the axial plane. Coronal, right? Coronal is, think like crown, right? Say for example, this is the head, right? And this is the nose. So crown is like this. So when we are taking the section like this from posterior to anterior, right? So it divides the body into anterior half and the posterior half. Sagittal plane will divide, see. This axial plane is what plane? Axial plane, if we select just one plane, right? One plane, one. So axial plane divides the body into upper part and lower part. So this is that axial plane. So if I say that this is the head, this is the nose, axial planes will be going like this, right? Very classical. This is how the CT scan goes, right? But then that's not the only plane which is studied. The next one, this plane, can you see this is like a face, right? This is like a face, right? So here, this one is the coronal plane. Coronal plane. coronal plane divides the body into anterior and the posterior part, not necessarily anterior half or posterior half, right? Because say this is the nose, so you take the sections like this. These are all coronal planes, right? These are coronal planes. And what would be the sagittal plane, right? This is the nose, and these are called as the sagittal planes. That is what is called as the sagittal plane. Sagittal plane will divide the body into right and left, right? Axial plane will divide the body into upper and lower, right? Coronal will divide into anterior and posterior. And when the sagittal will go, so divide into right side and left side, right? So sagittal divides into right and left. Coronal divides into anterior and posterior, right? If you select any of the plane, so that's anterior and this is posterior. And axial into upper half and the lower half. I mean upper and lower, not half, right? Upper and lower. So this is the axial plane. Now same patient, right? This is the same patient. This is the same patient. See, right? This is the epidural hematoma. Now this epidural hematoma, when you see it as compared to another one which is subdural hematoma. Now you know the subdural hematoma, right? Subdural, underneath the dura. Underneath the dura where there will be few bridging veins, right? There will be veins because these are the veins which will be going all the way from superficial veins of brain and the dural venous sinuses, right? They will be communicating. See this, here it is, right? The very classical picture, because in such cases CT is the diagnosis, right? One has to go for CT. This is the reason whenever you come across any of the head injury and classical typical history, and that history when it tells that it's till what point the brain can survive this pressure. Well, the thing what is called as the vicious cycle. When the brain, see, when the blood keeps on getting accumulated, right, it will start giving the numbness. So when it becomes numb, person will be feeling more sleepy, so he won't be reacting. And then the compression will keep on increasing on and on and on. That's the reason that whenever there is history, that's what I was talking about, that whenever there is history, no compromise, right? You need to rule out these things, otherwise you will keep on regretting for rest of your life, right? So see, in this case, right, this is massive. This is what is called as the subdural hematoma, right? This is subdural. I'll explain it, but right now just have a visual picture how it looks like. This is typical concave, right? This is like this. This is concave, right? Concave. So this is concave, crescent shaped. It is crescent shaped. Hyperdense area, right? Classical. So this is subdural. So when you look at this pattern, this part, this is how it looks like. This one. So this is subdural hematoma. So now under any circumstances, you will never be confusing between subdural hematoma and the epidural hematoma. True? Epidural hematoma will occur when there is a very classical history of impact, right? You might find, not in every case, but you might find that there is a fracture of the skull. That also you can see. While when it comes to this subdural hematoma, right, the shape is, see it is widespread. So much so even here also, this is also the hematoma, this one, right? Yes, I put the pictures. In fact, it's the same patient. This patient is different, and this is another patient. But from this point onwards, right, the entire all the images there of the same patient at different levels, just to show that where exactly it can extend. So let's talk about the subdural hematoma first. Right, this is subdural hematoma. Subdural hematoma, when it the history would be trauma. And trauma of what type? Trauma is mostly vehicular, right? Vehicular accident. So sudden acceleration or sudden deceleration, right? Car is going at a high speed, and when there is impact, so it is sudden deceleration. So sudden increase, right? Sudden increase or decrease in speed, right? That makes things easier, right? Increase and decrease in speed. And you will see that, see, Dura is tough. Dura is tough. It won't give the way as so easily. So that's the reason this is more common, right? It is commonest. Commonest one, alcoholics, right? There was one interesting mail. Sir, are you so much against alcohol? Because almost in every lecture, right, you come up with something against the alcohol. Yeah, I am against the alcohol, right? Because there is no fun. There is no fun. There are much better things in life. So, alcohol, elderly patient, right? Elderly patient. When we'll be studying the cerebrum, at that point, I'll show you some of the CT scans, right, of a young patient and the aged patient. The thing what is called as the aging, what is called as the cerebral shrinkage or the cerebral atrophy. Many times you will read the reports that there are few areas of cerebral atrophy coinciding with the age. Right? So this is why if you keep on, but in many of the cases you'll find that at any age the brains their brains are functioning very well. How much you use it. If you don't use it, right, that part will degrade. Simple rule, right? So over here, you'll find that elderly patient, those who are aging, alcoholics, they are more prone for this. In this, there would be rupture, right? What would break? The rupture of those bridging veins, right? Rupture of bridging veins. These are the veins, right, which are into this area. Bridging veins, that is superficial vein of brain and the DVS, right? Those superficial veins of brain and dural venous sinuses, right? So that's how they really look like. Now, here it is, right? So that's what we saw in the form of subdural hematoma. Classical picture would be the concave or the crescent shaped. Right? Now see, in this case, as I said, that this portion, right, this one is also a subdural hematoma. Just to see that how do we say that this is a subdural hematoma, I'm showing you more axial sections, right? So as say we start cutting from this layer and we keep on going at a lower levels, so that when we are taking a section over here, right, it is like when we are taking a section over here, that section is passing through base of the skull, right? So this is the head, right? We take a section over here, right? We have taken the axial section and we see it. But as we go down, right? So we are at the base of the skull. This is the base of the skull. है ना? So now watch it. Here it is. Here it is. Right? This is so nicely seen. See, this is stentorium cerebelli, right? And here it is. Here it is. This one. Right? This one. See, right? It is settling over tentorium. So This is like, say, over tentorium, right? If we still keep on taking the sections and we reach to the floor of middle cranial fossa, right? So that's the middle cranial fossa. This is the middle cranial fossa, right? This one, right? That one is the middle cranial fossa. I remove those lines. See, here it is, right? This is the floor of middle cranial fossa. So when you see the skull, right, this is the middle cranial. These are the fossas, anterior cranial fossa, middle, and the posterior. So this is the floor of middle cranial fossa, right? Middle cranial fossa. Now visualize it, right? Give an imagination that this is such a huge subdural hematoma that when we are taking the sections at a higher level, right, we see that, okay, there is accumulation of hematoma, hemorrhage over here. But as we keep on taking the sections, we find that this subdural hematoma is extending all the way down up to the floor of middle cranial fossa. So from the top, it is settling over tentorium and the floor of middle cranial fossa. And what this means, one thing is very clear, that this is big hemorrhage. So if the hemorrhage is big, when we really say that in case of thorax, we say that shift of mediastinal shift. This is where we are learning midline shift. See, these are ventricles, right? See what has happened to this right ventricle. Totally compressed, right? Totally compressed. So there is midline shift to the left, right? Or towards left side, right? This means this is a very advanced case, right? So this is how you should really diagnose. I just saved the entire file, right? The classical picture. See, it is irregular at every interval. See here also, right? Here also. So these are all hemorrhages, right? See, but the appearance of epidural hematoma, that was superb, right? Just biconvex like lens. However, in this case, they are concave, irregular, and it spreads. No, patient couldn't survive, because this is how he presented, and condition got worsened within minutes. Right? In fact, it was almost like DOA, dead on arrival, almost like that. Vehicular accident. This was massive. In fact, I got these images of 9 patients, right? Some of them, they are very bad, but yes, I'll show you, because in that, there is massive skull injury, means multiple fractures of skull, right? So that's it for today, right? Thank you so much, and I'll put this file into our shared folder, right? And in different colors, it is Happy Holi once again. Thank you and bye-bye. Next time we'll be taking the blood supply, right? So circle of Willis in all the veins, and we'll see lots of angiographies. Fine. Pars cerebri. Okay. Pars cerebri, say it is the dura, right? And this is the skull, right? In skull, this is the base of the skull. Here it is on the side view. If you see, this is the plate, It is called as crista galli. So this is the frontal bone. This one would be the parietal bone. This one would be the occipital bone. In occipital, there is external occipital protuberance. Over here is the internal occipital protuberance. And it goes like this. So this is one wedge which is dividing the whole thing into two parts. Then there would be another one which is forming like a tent, right? So this is what is called as the tentorium cerebelli. Tentorium cerebelli, right? And this one is falx cerebri, right? So one falx cerebri, second tentorium cerebelli. And when you watch from the top, right? This is the side view. And when you watch from the top, I'm talking about this area. I'm talking about this area. When you watch from the top, so there would be, this is one cerebellar hemisphere, this is another cerebellar hemisphere, and this dura, there would be one layer over here. This is the layer which is handling that occipital sinus, right? So this one, where these dura, they separate, and they have got that occipital sinus in between, and this is what is called as the falx, because again it is sharp, cerebelli, right? This is 3, and the fourth one, that's the pituitary fossa, right? Just where is the pituitary fossa? sorry. Here it is, right? This one is pituitary, right? This is the pituitary region. To be specific, this one. So there, if you watch from the side, right? So it leads to formation of pituitary fossa, and that fossa is covered by the membrane, and that is the fourth part, that is called as the diaphragma sella. This is also called as sella turcica, right? It is also called as sella turcica, right? That is like a saddle, and this is where the pituitary, or our pituitary bone, sits. So in pituitary, yeah, because say pituitary, it is like this. This is the pituitary, right? And this is called as the pituitary stalk. So this diaphragma sella, in fact, wraps around, it envelops around this pituitary stalk, and that's how this is formed, right? It wraps around pituitary stalk, and then it goes, right? And obviously there is a bone over here, and this is a gland, our pituitary gland. Then there is anterior pituitary, posterior pituitary, etc. Right? Okay, so thanks a lot, and see you next time. Take care. Happy Holi. Bye bye.